at 0600 hours, 4 Ukrainian FPV drones took off from a wooded area, positioned 8 kilometers behind Ukrainian positions, heading toward a Russian fuel convoy in occupied Luhansk. The final drone had just risen above the trees when their command frequencies illuminated the combat zone, alerting any monitors in range. The pilots were unaware, but those broadcasts had already betrayed their location. As the FPV units locked onto their southwestern path toward the fuel convoy, they entered the perimeter of Russia's electronic monitoring network, precisely where Russian scouts were tuned in. 20 kilometers to the north, a Russian R-934 automated signal locating vehicle had been scanning since midnight. The unit resembles an ordinary army truck, but with 4 dish antennas mounted on top. Each antenna spins separately, scanning the radio spectrum from 20 MHz to 3 GHz, searching for one target, Ukrainian drones. When those 4 command signals activated, the R-934's processor analyzed them against its identification library in 0.3 seconds. Frequency range 1.2 to 1.4 GHz. With hopping over 50 channels, output power 10 watts per unit. Russian drones employed entirely distinct profiles. These were clear the enemy. 4 Ukrainian drones on a 247 magnetic heading, but a heading alone provides no actionable data. It's an endless line, not a fixed spot. The source might be 1 kilometer distant or 100. That's why Russians always pair these vehicles. 25 kilometers northeast, another R-934 picked up the identical signals on a 190. Bearing triangulation could now commence. Both units relayed to a Borisogol-2 command vehicle, basically a rolling data hub that integrates electronic intel from the area. Here's the calculation method. The drone signal propagates at light speed, 300 km. It hits the second R-934 only 0.0 seconds after the first. This delay is crucial. The system multiplies that time gap by light speed, yielding 24 kilometers. Thus, the drone is 24 kilometers nearer to the first sensor than the second. But why just 24 kilometers difference when sensors are 45 kilometers apart? Because the drone is almost equidistant, like a bird midway between 2 observers. Distances nearly equal. The processor plots a hyperbola of points exactly 24 kilometers closer to sensor 1, and where this curve intersects the 247 and 190 lines, that's the fix. The whole identification, positioning lasted 23 seconds. The automated combat control network forwarded these curves straight to the closest artillery group, ABM-21 Grad Unit 31 kilometers distant. The Ukrainian pilots suspected nothing. They concentrated on guiding 4 drones at once toward a fuel convoy due in Dobzhansk at 0650. Fail this chance, and the next one was 72 hours away. But survival for the next 90 seconds was key. The Grad unit's reaction needed no human input. Orders since 2022. Drone spotting prompts instant fire. Hydraulics hummed as 40 tubes rose to 52. The targeting computer factored in 8-knot westerly crosswind and started the firing protocol. The pilots heard it prior to seeing it, that signature cascade of rockets firing one after another. Not artillery's sharp bang, but a escalating rip. An experienced listener can tally them. A complete battery volley, impact in 60 seconds. The squad chief knew chances were slim. Each 122 millimeters rocket holds 6.4 kilograms of explosive amid pre-scored steel shards. Kill zone 30 meters, 40 rockets in a hex grid blanket 600 by 600 meters fully. Their takeoff site was dead center in that area, yet the FPV drones were ascending past 1,500 meters, just 10 kilometers from origin. Several links now, and they'd loop back to safe skies seeking signals. They required 20 more seconds to hit the transfer zone for self-guidance. 20 seconds. As 40 rockets curved through dawn at 690 meters per second, 15 seconds, the shriek grew audible. Not one tone, but a harmony of inbound metal. 10 seconds, drones entered disputed airspace, onboard systems assuming control. 5 seconds. The chief pulled the controller's power plug. 3 seconds. Both pilots leaped into their ride. Motor idling. 1 second. Wheels churning dirt. The rig surging ahead. The woods detonated rearward. Not one explosion, but cascading booms as rockets marched over the zone in a 6-second storm. The shockwave hit their vehicle at 200 meters out. Shrapnel pierced the rear panel, but they pressed on. 4 FPVs pressed southeast to Luhansk, now self-navigating via preset routes. The pilots lived, but their drones were surfacing on another's display. Meanwhile, the fuel convoy rolled south to Luhansk at 60 kilometers per hour. It had passed the final key switch and entered the 40-kilometer stretch where Ukrainian strategists predicted densest Russian guards. Each minute endured brought the convoy nearer the yard, and the tight slot where an FPV hit would count. The Russian Tor-M2 unit near Starobilsk had monitored the inbound drones since they breached range at 38 kilometers. The setup perched on a ridge, its radar enjoying clear views over the valley. The Tor's radar is a flat rectangular slab seeming to spin atop the vehicle, but it's not physical spin. This phased array directs its beam digitally. Imagine 100 spotlights you can point instantly without shifting them. The processor dictates which activate and when, forming tight beams that scan the heavens thrice per second. But the Tor's targeting system has a key constraint that drone handlers leverage. While the scan radar handles 48 objects, the lock-on radar distinct K-band at 35 GHz can spotlight just 4 at once. Each spotlight is a slim 2 beam that must steadily mark the target from fire to hit. If the mark drops over 0.5 seconds, the missile loses track and detonates itself. This poses a math issue. For drones, nearing from varied heights and paths force the Tor to split focus. Worse, vertical slew rate, 45 per second, is half the lateral. Drones that abruptly plunge or ascend can briefly escape lock. Compelling relock. Ukrainian handlers know and craft paths to tax these bounds. The radar tech observed for blips in combat spread. Top drone at 2,000 meters. Steady at 180 kilometers per hour, mid-drone at 500 meters. Slight weaved at 2 bottom drones at 200 meters, exploiting every rise and dip for mask. The bottom drones abruptly sank lower. The tech knew it instantly. They'd sensed his radar shift from scan to lock. When Tor engages, power surges from intermittent pulses to steady glow. Dive now or face missile in 8 seconds. Both low drones skimmed to 50 meters, hugging ground. The Tor could follow all 4 without issue. It manages up to 48 concurrent tracks, but following and firing differ. Following needs mere radar echoes off the mark. Firing demands a committed guidance slot, a steady beam illuminating so the missile follows. The Tor has only 4 slots, like 4 pointers for 48 targets, versus for drones, that ought to suffice. But layout muddled all. The top drone flew to predictably obvious bait. The bottom ones vanished in terrain. The mid one was ambiguous. Protocol dictated hitting sure threats first, but the unit leader knew wiser. Staggered fire rule. Lose 2 missiles. Evaluate, then 2 more if required. Firing all 4 risks, depleting ready stock if one succeeds. Against multiples, conserve rounds. 2 9M338 missiles blasted from upright tubes. These don't pursue tails, that burns fuel. Rather, they ascend to a projected spot over the mark, then plummet. The descent yields stronger echoes off upper sides, and gravity boosts 200 meters per second to strike speed. The top drone held 2,000 meters, unchanging. The lead missile's prox fuse fired at 5 meters. 14 kilograms of tungsten shards burst out at 2,000 meters. The FPV vanished as fragments bigger than postcards. 10 kilometers east, the convoy passed the Spartak detour. Timetable set it at Luhansk by 0650. So remaining drones had under 30 minutes to overtake the engine. If they endured the next 30 seconds, as those launch trails showed, white exhaust seen 30 kilometers off. Both low drones plunged to the Adar riverbed, but one yanked up hard just before. The drone's processor spotted wires spanning the bed at 20 meters via camera, climb, or snag. It rose to 80 meters, past the lines, then sank again. The radar tech saw them fade totally. The Adar drops 30 meters under local ground. Factor Earth's curve at that distance, and you get 45 meters blind spot. The Taurus beam, however, digitally nimble, can't curve past horizon. The mid-drone attempted dodge as the next missile pair fired, dropping from 500 to 200 meters, but Taurus processor had projected its spot in 11 seconds, not current. The missile met the forecast point exactly as the drone arrived. Another tungsten cloud, another drone erased. The two low drones halted all evasion. The top drone, their lure just fell. Motion now would boost radar echo, ES spotting. They flew flat and true, shrinking profile, turning invisible. 2 of 4 downed seemed okay, but the unit leader knew otherwise. The escapees were ground huggers, the armed ones. The downed were sacrifices, trading height for endurance, soaking costly missiles to secure the goal. Relocating the battery took 4 minutes. Drop radar, engage drives, move to superior overlook, settle, raise radar, realign. By reacquire survivors advanced 12 kilometers, they surfaced short at the bed's east tip. The Tor fired 2 more, but drones ducked into a rail trench. Missiles hit vacant space. At 0622, both FPVs exited the Tor's kill range. 60 kilometers forward, the fuel convoy entered Dovzhansk yard, but Russians stood ready. The R330ZH had sat at Dovzhansk rail yard since midnight, shielding the fuel offload. The rig looks like a basic army truck with roof antenna grids, but those broadcast 100 watts of focused disruption over 30 km. At 0640. Both FPVs hit the disruption field. Their GPS units, locked on 8 birds with 3 meters precision, heard only noise. GPS sats circle at 20,000 kilometers, sending 50 watts, earthbound. Signals are fainter than a remote click. The ZH blasts interference on GPS bands at 100 watts from mere km away, like spotting a lunar lamp while a neighbor blasts a floodlight in your eyes.
Drones fell back to inertial mode, sensors and gyros holding course from last fix. But Inzwanders, each minute piles 10 meters error. After 5, maybe 50 meters astray, sufficient to bypass target. Ukrainian handlers, 180 kilometers distant, saw feeds worsen as disruption peaked. Rate fell from 30 FPS to 10. Then 5. Clarity dropped from sharp 1080p to blocky 480p. The ZH hammered full force, but drones aimed antennas, fixed on handlers, gave 18 decibels boost. That's 63x power, even with 90% packet loss. Enough pierced for hand control, but tough. The lead handler battled triple woes. Input delay. Each move took 400 milliseconds to appear, like laggy satellite gaming. Frame skips. Feed froze seconds, then leaped. Drone relocated. He set manual optics. Exposure cut 3 stops to pierce haze. Focus fixed infinite to halt hunting. FPS over pixels. Better 10 FPS at 480p than 1 at 108p. Handler spied the yard amid static and key, the convoy, via IR cams. Dovzhansk. Yard shone like nocturnal urban. Metal retains warmth unlike soil or cement. Tankers, 60 tons diesel each, glowed from prior sun. White boxers in neat rows. Tracks formed dual heat stripes, aiming at mark. Lead handler matched his drone to those IR paths. Feed was choppy show. Yard noise, but adequate for line. 3-port, 2-center tankers, height to 300 meters. The ZH tech eyed the video freq on analyzer. Hopping over 5.8 gigahertz, he threw all tactics. Flood jam, drowning bands in static. Pin jam, hitting hops as drone switched. Scan jam, chasing hop sequence, guessing next. But FPV radio jumped 1000 SAQ, over 50 in random code. Jamming 40 left, 10 open per Ms. Packets slipped. Russian troops at yard wrapped fuel pump. Shifting diesel from convoy to buried tanks. Zeotech saw power gauges pegged, gear overheating from effort, but links held. 2 drones 5 kilometers in 90 seconds to hit. At 0645, first FPV rammed third tanker at 67 meters per second. 105 kilograms charge made 50 psi blast. Tankers, spec 15 psi max. The car didn't blow, it split like overpressed balloon. Misting 60 tons diesel in 100 meters fan. Flaming fuel ran tracks. Pooling under neighbors. Second car's relief valve, hitting 200 trigger, popped, spewing vapor to fire. Third stid, then fourth, in 30 seconds, 5 cars ablaze, each dumping 72,000 L2 blaze. Second handler paused exact 30 seconds post first hit. He awaited secondary blasts to fade, needed clear IR view of yard's fuel store amid smoke and heat. At 30, holes in heat overload, their box shape of pump house. He nosed down, 20 seconds on. Second FPV came from East Handler, eyeing huge IR flare from torched convoy, lined on fuel house. Upwind spot to fan flames yard wide. Drone started end plunge from 400 meters. Strike at 0646. House held. 500 tons diesel. First blast bowed tank sides out. Then fueler mix. Hit ideal. Not overfuel, not lean. Perfect for peak ruin. Follow-up blast cracked glass in Dobzhansk, 3 kilometers off. In under a minute, Ukrainians wrecked thousands of gallons diesel and made Russians hike once more. See you later.